Welcome in, everyone. Fifth annual QuadPod Sports Podcast Mock Draft. I am Trey Lee, and I have the esteemed pleasure of welcoming my two co-hosts, not three, two co-hosts, Josh
It's happening, everybody.
and Trevor.
What's up?
And it wouldn't be a quad pod without four people. So this year, because Mr. Jeffrey Wills is not able to join us, sadly, we miss Jeffrey. We love you. We have the pleasure of being joined by Brandon Carney, host of the Off the Bench podcast, and also of Benchwarmer brand fame. He does all the funny football takes on Instagram and YouTube and stuff, but his real takes are on Off the Bench. Brandon, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to make everyone forget about Jeffrey like he was never here.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Speaking of Jeffrey, we're going to take a look at last year's draft. Last year's draft, we actually did probably a little bit better than we usually do picking. I can say that I had the most picks currently sitting here with 3. Jeffrey had 3, and Josh and Trevor had 1 apiece. Anything you want to say about that, fellas?
Yeah, Josh, we kind of sucked it up last year, bud.
Yeah, I don't claim that. I actually claim Jeffrey's correct picks. So actually, I had 3 correct picks, and Jeffrey had 1. Since he's not here to take credit for his picks. So I will take credit for Jeffrey's picks.
No, let's disperse it out. We'll split it up a little bit.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Brandon gets 1. You each get 1 more. So.
Exactly. Look, I'll take anything I can get. I did a mock draft show last year, and it was only me and my co-host, so we each had 16 picks, and I still don't think I got 3 correct. So I'll take what I can get here as far as credit goes.
That's funny.
All right. Well, this year we're going to get things rolling early. I mean, we just no reason to wait. And Mr. Trevor Howard, you were on the clock with the Chicago Bears.
All right. I think this one was pretty obvious. I mean, unless they kind of just, throw a curveball in there, but I've got Chicago going with Caleb Williams out of USC. I mean, what can you say? I mean, he's been kind of a shoo-in to go first pick since his sophomore season. His numbers this year weren't as good as last year, but I think his comparison would be kind of like a baby Patrick Mahomes. So I think he's pretty much a shoo-in for pick number 1 unless Chicago trades back for some reason or something crazy happens.
Man, I don't know. This has been built up for so many years. Caleb Williams is one of those guys like Trevor Lawrence, and you see for 2 straight years in college, they're like, hey, he's going to be the number 1 pick, and it's just like it's kind of built into them at some point. So unless Chicago trades back, which I don't see with them trading Fields away, I think this is a shoe-in.
Look, he's already said that how many yards did he say he's gonna get Keenan Allen his first season? he's already planning on throwing it to him a lot. So
Josh,
definitely set up for success.
Josh, you have other opinions about Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Caleb Williams fan in the world. I kind of think some of his things are a bit overrated. Oklahoma, it was a lot easier for him to kind of be the guy up there, but he gets to USC and I don't know, it was just a weird year out there. I mean, they start preseason in the top 4 and then they just fall apart midway through the season. And, a lot of that did have to do with Lincoln Riley just not playing defense for some reason at USC. But I mean, lots of it on the offensive side too. I mean, Caleb Williams was just not making smart decisions with the football. I mean, there were multiple times where I'm watching Pac-12 After Dark and he's just, screw it, somebody's down there that might catch it. And somebody was down there, but it wasn't on his team. Or just overthrows or just, I don't know. I mean, it makes sense. He's going to go number 1. I mean, he, former Heisman Trophy winner. He's flashy. He's what you want if you're trying to rebuild a franchise quarterback after what you thought your franchise quarterback kind of sputters out in Fields. So, I mean, it makes sense. If I was in Trevor's spot, I probably would still pick Caleb Williams, even though I don't think he's the best quarterback in the draft. But I mean, it's just one of those things of common sense has to kick in at some point. You have to go, yeah, Caleb Williams is going to be the guy no matter what I think. So
makes sense. So number 2, the Washington Commanders. This is really on, in my opinion, where the draft starts, which is kind of crazy because the last couple of years it's been like the first 2 picks are like automatic. So this year there's kind of some rumblings on who the quarterback is after Caleb Williams goes. Is it Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, Drake May? I mean, shoot, let's put Bo Nix up there. Bo Nix.
Let's
Shout
not.
out, shout out to my Bo Nix fans over here. Anyway, we're gonna go Jaden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. The 2023 Heisman Trophy winner and the SEC Offensive Player of the Year this year. The dude was incredible. I know his team did not have a great success this year, but I mean, 40 touchdowns through the air, 10 touchdowns in the run game, and over 1,000 yards rushing, including a pretty crazy performance against Florida. 234 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, over 300 passing yards. The dude just is electric. And I think that's what the Commanders need, is a guy that will be the face of the franchise. They need somebody to be stable. And with new coaching in Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, they need somebody there that's going to keep them stable, especially in their division where Dallas and Philly are just running it right now. So if he can just keep them in third for now and just ride the wave, eventually they'll accumulate enough talent, I think, that, you know, they may eventually take over. And I know Brandon, friend of the Off the Bench podcast, Austin Eckler is now on the team. What do you think
Yes,
about
sir.
Austin Eckler and the Jaden Daniels potential connection?
No, I love it. I mean, so many people are writing off Austin Eckler, and I mean, so many people as well are going to think I'm an apologist just because he came on the show. But like, I genuinely watching Austin Eckler, knowing the timing of when he got injured, and you watch him, and it's like it's clearly bothering him all year, and so it's a matter to me of, if as long as he can get over that injury, and it doesn't sound like it was anything that was going to be a career long sort of thing. Obviously he's older, so that's going to affect recovery, but like, I don't see any reason he can't have a bounce back year. Now, he's never going to be the Austin Eckler we saw that led fantasy teams to championships for 2 straight years, because that was a result of him having a workhorse role despite not having a workhorse build. And now he's going to play with Brian Robinson. But I think from an actual football perspective, he's an incredible fit in that offense alongside Brian Robinson, and to play with a rookie quarterback as just the ideal sort of safety valve out of the backfield. I love the fit.
Yeah, I think Washington's very much needed this kind of spark in the offense. So I think an addition of Eckler and Daniels will give them that spark. They won't be so one-dimensional. So I think that's a great pick for them at 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be real fun times to be a Commanders fan, or whatever they call themselves now. But they've got a whole new coaching staff, and I mean, they've got completely new ownership from the top down now, and so hopefully you're gonna see a Washington, not only just a fan base that gets re-energized about a team that's good, but a ownership staff, and then a coaching staff that really is like, okay, we're kind of starting from the beginning. We're kind of just trying to rebuild this franchise, and taking Jaden Daniels as your quarterback is probably one of the best ways to start a rebuild of an offense. And then adding Austin Eckler, that's just that's great. I mean, it's just a great safety valve. I mean, it's what you want if you're trying to rebuild a franchise. You want somebody who's proven, who's got a good track record, that can be the safety valve for a quarterback that's may get blown up by some of the other teams he has to play in his, especially if Dallas's defense comes back the way that it was this season. That will be interesting to see how Jaden Daniels is able to adjust to that style of defense.
All right. I have been long on record that this pick does not need to be complicated. I've seen every which way people projecting the Patriots to trade back, they should just draft Marvin Harrison, this and that. It comes down to this and this alone. We need a quarterback. I don't know how to make that any clearer. Like, the roster currently has Jacoby Brissett on it by design to pair with a rookie quarterback. It's very clear to me. Like, people love to point to the multiple holes on the roster, and they're just like, oh, you should build something else up before taking a quarterback because the quarterback's not going to be primed to succeed. I'm like, anytime a rookie quarterback goes somewhere, maybe outside of Caleb Williams, because they've got all these receivers now, like their situation's never ideal. You need to get a quarterback if you think they can be a franchise guy, which is why I am taking Drake May here. From a fan perspective, I will be perfectly okay whether this is May or Daniels, as long as it's one of them. If it's McCarthy, I'll be a little bit miffed. But I'm going to take Drake May here. I think he's got the upside to be a franchise guy. And the goal here, it's uncharted territory for Patriots fans, right? Like, we're not used to having a pick this high. We're not used to desperately needing a quarterback like this. But the goal should always be that you never have to pick this high again. And so we need to leverage it while we're here. Like, we have the number 3 overall pick. The defense is good enough to get us to, 7, 8 wins if things pan out decently next year. And it's going to be a slow build, but that slow build needs to start with the quarterback. And for people saying, wait till when? Next year's quarterback class isn't very good. And then after that, I mean, there's just too many variables. You're putting off your desired competitiveness for, too many seasons at that point. So for me, it's Drake May. I think he's got, franchise guys sort of upside. Whether he realizes that upside, I don't know, but he's the guy that I am definitely going to take the chance on here at number 3 for New England.
So, Brandon, if for whatever reason, and I mean, we've seen this happen, in years past, if for whatever reason the Patriots don't go quarterback here, what direction do you think New England's front office decides to go?
Yeah, if for whatever reason it wasn't a quarterback at 3, I really don't feel like it's going to be Marvin Harrison, but just to entertain that prospect, I think you would have to go trade back up and get one of Penix or Bo Nix or something, because to me it's a lack of, you're not even trying really if you go after one of those guys and don't get a quarterback to pair with them, because it's like Jacoby Brissett's, the ceiling's capped, right? And I mean, free agent quarterbacks, people will always say, oh, you could do what the Falcons did and go get Kirk Cousins. I mean, guys like that don't come available every offseason. And Kirk Cousins is also 35 off a torn Achilles. Like, finding franchise quarterbacks is so hard. Like, you need to take that shot if you can. And so if for whatever reason they decide they don't value, a quarterback to be worth the number 3 pick, I still think they got to come out of this draft with one, because Penix or Nix, obviously age notwithstanding, but like those guys could be QB1 in next year's draft if they were in it, because of how weak that class is. So I think you got to at least come out with one of them if that's the plan.
Okay, so my question to you, do you trust the Patriots offensive system this year to just have a quarterback to succeed? Because I don't know about how you feel, but like, I always thought Mac Jones was a really good fit going into the NFL. I think it was just the situation wasn't right. So do you think that they have the guys in place now to kind of help a quarterback succeed?
Yeah, I mean, the guys that are in place are definitely not ideal. I mean, I think I love Hunter Henry at tight end. I love Ramondre Stevenson at running back. I think at receiver, you've got basically a bunch of wide receiver 3s, maybe a wide receiver 2 if you squint real hard, with guys like Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas. Like, they're pretty good. But to address the, are they suited to kind of accommodate a quarterback? I look at Mac Jones and I definitely, you see the obvious fall off from year 1 to year 2 and year 3. I just feel like you still have to assess some blame to Mac Jones there for completely falling apart. I know the situation around him was bad, but if you are a guy who's truly going to be built to be a difference maker at the quarterback position, and when I say that, I mean like top 8 to 10 quarterback, the type of guy you can realistically win a Super Bowl with, that type of guy will not completely collapse no matter what you do to the situation around them. Like, no, they did not treat him well, but God, it was painful to watch at the end. Like, you can't excuse some of that to being just the situation. I don't think he's built for it.
I don't think this is a hard pick for Arizona. I think there's one position group that they are in desperate need to pad, and that's their wide receiver room. If their goal is to keep Kyler Murray for the long run, which every year it seems like they threaten to get rid of him, or he threatens to run away, or whatever they're doing down there. If Kyler Murray is their guy, if they want to keep him, if they want to get back to a season like they had a couple of years ago where they were started 10-0, and everybody was like, oh, Cliff Kingsbury's, the next greatest thing, and then, have a down year and you turn around and fire Kingsbury. Whatever that decision was. But, I think if Arizona wants a chance to get back to where they are, I mean, the best option for them is obviously Marvin Harris from Ohio State. I'm not an Ohio State fan. Obviously, I don't like Ohio State, but I mean, Marvin Harris is like what you want if you want a wide receiver. I mean, this dude's versatile. He's fast. He reads defenses unbelievably fast. He's able to get his hips around when he needs to on a defender. I mean, he has a gift and a talent to know where the ball is and how to put himself in a position to have a great year. Now, 2022 was a better year for him. He had 10 more catches in 22 than he did this past season. But I mean, this year for 23, he had 67 catches, a little over 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. And I mean, that's a great. I mean, those are great stats. If you're an NFL front office that's looking to make a fresh or a rookie wide receiver and trying to build him up as your wide receiver one. Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's a difficult pick for Arizona. If they go somewhere else, I'll be shocked. But I mean, this just seems to be the most logical choice of what they should do.
All right. So with pick number 5, I've got Malik Neighbors going to the LA Chargers. I kind of feel the same way Josh felt. I felt like I feel like they're going to go receiver right here. Personally, I think Malik Neighbors is a better option than Marvin Harrison Jr. I would say that he kind of got screwed out of winning the Blitnikoff this year. This year he had 89 catches for 1,568 yards and 14 touchdowns. LSU's offense this year was just insane, and which I know a lot of it was because their defense was so bad, but I think his build and how fast he is going to be a really good option to kind of replace Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I think Neighbors is a perfect fit for this offense. He's going to be Justin Herbert's new best friend. And Jim Harbaugh gets a weapon in his first year. So that's fun.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big pick, especially since this is his very first pick. So we'll see how he goes with that. But I think him and LA would be insane.
All right, I'm going to continue our run on receivers here with the New York Giants. I was really tempted to take JJ McCarthy here because of all the noise, and I think this is a good trade up spot. Maybe potentially, I don't know. I think New York needs some new blood in there, and that's why I'm going Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington. I mean, whether the quarterback is Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, that's a terrible choice between the two, but either one of them needs a receiver besides Darius Slayton and whoever else they have. I only know Darius Slayton because I'm an Auburn fan. This year, Rome Odunze had 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns. I've seen a lot of comps to him of Devontae Adams, which should be a good sign. He really helped Penix in that offense this year really break out, and I think he will have a chance to be the go up and get it guy in New York, and they desperately need that in, like I said, in the same division as the defense of Philly and Dallas. It's going to be rough sledding the next couple of years anyway, so you need to stockpile your options while you have them.
He'll be everything Kenny Golladay wasn't.
Yes.
That's exactly what they're looking for.
Man, I was so excited about Kenny Golladay at the Giants. I drafted him on my fantasy team. He was ready to go, and he was not ready to go, in fact.
No, that dude took his bag and said, "I'll see you later. I'm done playing football at a high level. Goodbye." All right. I guess I got the next pick here. I'm going to stop the slide here for probably the most notable, non-skill player. It's Joe Alt to the Tennessee Titans. The Titans got some weird energy here. They are trying to compete and build a contender, which I just really didn't expect with Will Levis at quarterback. Upon review, I reminded myself that Levis was essentially a first-round pick. I mean, he was like 33rd overall. So I guess they may have more invested in Levis than I did mentally from my hopes for him. But look, the Titans, for better or for worse, they are going kind of all in here to build at the very least a playoff team between, signing Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, trading for L'Jarius Sneed, and all of that, contending, being an elite team. It all starts in the trenches. It all starts with the line. And I think Joe Alt is certainly best player available at this point. And the Titans are really sitting pretty because everyone above them, as we just illustrated, needs a quarterback or a receiver. They don't, in theory, need either one of those. So they're going to get great value here with Joe Alt. And I feel pretty good that this pick will actually happen. Like if I'm going to be right about any of the picks in this mock, I could see this being the one. So I like Joe Alt to Tennessee here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm like you, Brandon. It's very odd that Will Levis seems to be the franchise guy in Tennessee. It's just not something you thought you were ever. It's not a sentence that I ever thought was going to come out of my mouth that Will Levis was a franchise quarterback in Tennessee. But I mean, that's what I love. One of the things I love the most about football, and it gets overlooked so much, is the trenches. I mean, you can't win football games without good, guys that are in the trenches. And I mean, just watching a little bit of Notre Dame football this year, I mean, Alt was the guy that really kind of was the anchor for that O-line up there. And so, it's going to be real interesting to see, what Tennessee does. This could also be one of those weird spots where somebody tries to come to Tennessee and say, hey, we'll offer you, something if you give us this pick because we need something that we know may not be there when it falls to us. So I think if we do see trades, I think it's going to start either with New York or with Tennessee. I think those are your earliest two spots where you're going to see some trading start.
I think Joe Alt's one of the most bust-proof picks in this draft. I think he's got all pro written all over him. So I think even if Levis isn't your future quarterback, I mean, like going forward in a couple of years, I mean, I think you've kind of got that line kind of locked down with him at that pick.
All right. Let us do the first of this draft and let us go defense for the draft. So I go first defensive player. Falcons are at 8. This is not an unusual story with the Falcons being having a high draft pick. Things have not been well in Atlanta ever since they blew a Super Bowl lead to Tom Brady. It just hasn't been the same there. You love to see it. But I went to the Falcons season opener in Atlanta mainly to watch Bryce Young play, and one of the glaring things that was very early notable at the Falcons season home opener was their defense was atrocious. I mean, just terrible. And so I think, for the Falcons, they're going to need somebody in the center of that defense to really, A, help direct traffic, but B, kind of be an anchor to kind of stop some of these run-heavy teams that they have to play in their division. Their offense is good enough to keep them in games in their division, but what lost them so many games this year was just a lack of just defensive talent. And so I have the Falcons taking Dallas Turner here. I hate, that Dallas Turner is gone. I loved watching him fly across the field for Alabama this year. Not only, does he give offensive lines nightmares, but the dude is just so smart in being able to read what an offense is wanting to do. And for a team like Atlanta, you want somebody back there that can help you move guys around and get a defensive game plan going on to really try and fix this really bad defense that has been plaguing Atlanta for a couple of years. So first defensive player off the board, I think it's a no-brainer for the Falcons to take Dallas Turner at number 8.
You talked about them kind of just being a really bad defense. I think with them taking Dallas Turner, I think he's an attitude guy. I think he comes in there. I think he kind of reinvigorates everything. I think he can bring a spark. He just plays with that intensity. I don't think he's not as good as Will Anderson, but when they played together at Bama, just together they were wreaking havoc. So I think he can kind of do what Will Anderson did on that defense and at the Texans. I think he can really bring that spark and give them an attitude and just kind of give them something. They've just been dead the past few years. So I
Yeah,
love
no,
that pick.
yeah, I completely agree. I mean, he's not as talented as Anderson, but attitude wise, I mean, they're like on the same page with each other. And I mean, you roll into that defensive locker room for summer camp, early fall stuff, and you kind of turn the attitude of that defense even just a little bit. And I mean, you're looking at a different kind of Falcons defense that rolls out on the field for their first game.
And this is a Falcons team that we're not. This isn't Desmond Ritter's Falcons team. This is Kirk Cousins' Falcons team.
Yeah,
Brandon said it earlier with the Patriots. You're hoping that you're not in this position for much longer. So you've got to take talent. And obviously, they bulked up on the offensive side this year. And so I think defense is the best way to go for them here. And it's a great pick for Dallas Turner.
All right, next up at pick number 9, I'm back on with Chicago. I have them going O-line right here. I just think they need somebody that can actually block. So I have them picking Talisa Fuaga out of Oregon State. He's a big guy, 6'6", 334 pounds. His PFF grade in 2023 was an 88.2. They need somebody that can go in there and protect Caleb Williams, basically. The Bears gave up 50 sacks last year, is tied for the most with the Bengals. We talked about Caleb Williams having those wide receivers being his best friend, but I think this guy right here is gonna save him a lot of trouble. He's not gonna end up in the dirt as much, hopefully, with him on the line.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick there. I think you've got to, after you're your quarterback, you've got to start investing in your O-line because that, like Josh said earlier, that wins you games. And Chicago is in a weird situation where their roster is not like the worst in the world. Obviously, this is their real pick. Their first pick was from the Panthers trading up for Bryce Young last year. So yet again, this is one of those things. Use your resources while you can. So I think this next pick by me is the steal of the draft, in my opinion. For the New York Jets, I have them taking Brock Bowers. And
Ooh.
Brock Bowers is genuinely one of the best football players I think I've ever seen in person. And that's just because he's torn apart Auburn's defense the last couple of years, sadly. But he was the John Mackey Award winner the last 2 years for the nation's best tight end. This past year was a little down. He only had 714 yards and 6 touchdowns, but man, was he on when he needed to be. He will be Aaron Rodgers' new friend and new safety net. And I wanted to ask you guys, where do you think Brock Bowers will rank among current tight ends in the NFL? Where the NFL stands? I think he's about 6 talent-wise, but I could be persuaded.
I don't think you're too far off there. I mean, you think of the guys that are kind of clearly established up there. You got Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson when he's healthy, George Kittle, Mark Andrews. I think those are probably the top 5 sort of locked in tight ends. And then you've got Bowers, who I could see definitely coming in and making an immediate impact where he surpasses the next up sort of guys, which off the top of my head, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, those kind of guys. So, I mean, I think 6 is a reasonable, I would call 6 a logical ceiling for him, at least in his rookie year. And then look, if he blows us all away, then he very well could find himself inside that top 5 after his rookie year. But heading in, I think that's kind of where you have to start.
All right, Brandon, you have one of the most interesting teams in this draft, the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I sure do. This is an interesting one because one, for the sake of mock drafts, we are going off of the picks that currently exist and are assigned to each team. But with the Vikings making that trade with the Texans to acquire an extra first rounder and with their extreme need for a quarterback, I kind of expect them to trade up with somebody once actual draft day rolls around. But even if they do that, I could very well see them getting the guy who I have them getting here at 11, because I don't think this guy will necessarily fall that far either. But it's JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. The Vikings need a quarterback. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. Sam Darnold is the projected starter. And for anybody who's thinking that, a couple years or a year, whatever, however long he spent in the San Francisco system, that rebuilt him and he's going to have this Geno Smith type of resurgence. Geno Smith is a 1 in a million sort of thing. You don't see guys spend that long in the league and then suddenly become, a top even 15 sort of starter. And I think that's the hope of some more delusional Vikings fans or some Sam Darnold apologists. This team needs a quarterback. The biggest thing right now is keeping Justin Jefferson somewhat happy at the very least. I mean, we already saw him get frustrated with the Kirk Cousins editions of the Vikings teams because they just could not get over the hump. And I think if you're going to keep an elite talent like him around as he, kind of rapidly approaches free agency here, granted they could franchise tag him, but that'll get messy in itself. You got to find a quarterback. And granted, the Vikings aren't in the best position right now to get a guy who I think is a slam dunk franchise guy. This is JJ McCarthy we're talking about, but I think you have to take the stab at him at this point and hope that he turns into and it's crazy to say this about Mr. Irrelevant, but like a Brock Purdy type of impact player where, he's on the cusp of being a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, because otherwise, it's getting late early here for the Vikings with Justin Jefferson. Like you got to maximize him while you have him and while he's in his prime, which is, his prime is going to last a while, but he could very well try to fight his way out of here if he doesn't have decent quarterback play. And the quarterback play just got a lot worse going from Cousins to Darnold. So they got to hope that McCarthy or someone else turns into a guy they can actually lean on.
Yeah, it's not the same situation that Green Bay faced with Devontae Adams. They still had Aaron Rodgers at that time, but it's kind of that you kind of still have that same feeling of like, okay, Vikings are kind of in this thing of you're running the risk here of losing your best offensive weapon if you don't at least to some degree get this pick right. Because a really angry Justin Jefferson that doesn't want to play for the Vikings is not a Justin Jefferson that you even want to throw out on the field because he's just not going to care. And like you said, if they attempt to franchise tag him, then you just get into a really messy situation to where it just becomes a virtual shouting match between the two camps that everybody just has to. It'd be like a car wreck. Everybody wants to look away, but nobody can look away because you're interested to see who's going to say what. And so, I think McCarthy would be perfect in that system. It was kind of almost the same style system that they were kind of running at Michigan, where he would have a pocket presence, and then when he needs to, he could move. But you bring in McCarthy, and him and Justin Jefferson kind of hit it off, and you're looking at a Vikings team that could do some damage to some teams this season.
And it's one thing too with JJ McCarthy, like, he's kind of the biggest question mark of this upper tier of quarterbacks. People aren't really sure whether he belongs with the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May, or does he belong with Bo Nix and Michael Penix in that, sort of next tier down. The best way to get something good out of JJ McCarthy is to give him Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and eventually TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones even to work with. So, I think it's an ideal situation for JJ, and it's a decent enough value for the Vikings, who are just looking for a warm body at quarterback that's not Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I think JJ's got a really high ceiling and a really low floor. I think he's very much a gamble at this pick. But I will say I was very surprised when Bama played him in the Rose Bowl. I really wasn't scared when Bama was playing him, and he just went off. So I think if you have those weapons around him, I think he has a lot of potential to get that offense moving.
Yeah, sitting through that Rose Bowl game in the stadium, it's an awesome venue, but sitting there and watching JJ McCarthy of all people pick, Kool-Aid, Terrion Arnold, and Caleb Downs apart. And it wasn't with anything fancy. It was just, 15-yard slant passes or, a couple of tight ends get loose. It wasn't anything fancy. And he's just good enough to sit there and wait for somebody with more talent and get open, and he can hit them in stride. That's not his problem. His problem is what happens if he gets put in a situation where he's got to do more than just sit in the pocket. And I think going to out of all the teams in this top 15 that have picks, going to the Vikings, going to Minnesota benefits him the best of not having to do more than he's comfortable with doing in his first year. And if you want him to be successful, then that's where if you're the Vikings, you're like, this is the guy that could be the most successful for our system. All right. Let's go to the most interesting team in the NFL right now with the Broncos, because things just keep getting more and more interesting in Denver. With quarterback number 2 or 3 or what I have never seen a franchise just kind of implode with 2 of the biggest names in the sport ever. I mean, you pay all this money to get well, crud, what's his name? Russell Wilson from Seattle. You pay all this money and you give up all these draft picks. And then, you pay all this money to bring in Sean Payton. And they just hate each other. They do not work well together. It's very obvious from watching them on the sidelines together. And then, they bench him. That and then the whole thing with the physical, and was he able to pass it and all that, and now he's gone to, where did they send him, where did he go, I forget. Where did they send? Pittsburgh. And I mean, you look at Pittsburgh, I mean, they get the steal of this. They've got to pay him the minimum $1.2 million, and the Broncos are backfilling the $30 million off his contract they still owe him. And so, I mean, if you're Denver, what do you do at this point? I mean, the logical thing is you need a quarterback. You don't have anybody. Your quarterback room is nothing, and this is another team that may try to go in that 6 or 7 spot and go up and ask New York, hey, what's it going to take for us to get the 6th pick, and try and snag a quarterback higher that may still be available. But I mean, I think for Sean Payton and the style of offense he was attempting to run in Denver, I think Penix is going to be his best bet. He wants somebody with experience, and Penix has been playing college football since 2018. He goes all the way back to when he was at Indiana before he went to Washington. You go all the way back to Indiana, and I mean, you look at his stats, and it's just 1,000 yards. He has 2,000-yard seasons in 19 and 20. And then you come to 22 and 23, and he has a 4,600-yard season and a 4,900-yard season. He takes Washington from being one of the worst teams in the nation to play in Michigan in the national championship. When they had Kalen DeBoer as, a new coach for the first couple of years. DeBoer comes in and changes this Washington team around. He takes Penix and he really builds Washington's offensive identity around Penix. Praise the Lord that Kalen DeBoer is now wearing crimson and white. I think for Denver, I mean, what do you have to lose if you take Penix and he busts? I mean, what do you have to lose at this point? I mean, you've already struck out pretty spectacularly with Russell Wilson. So, I mean, I don't think Penix is too much of a long shot here for them.
So at pick 13, we're going to Las Vegas. I was kind of torn on this pick. So my thinking was, I felt like they were going to take a Bama guy, because I feel like the Raiders always take a Bama guy for some reason. But I had them picking J.C. Latham. I have him coming in there, kind of bulking up that line a little bit. If they don't go him, I kind of see them going Terron Arnold. But I feel like J.C. Latham's pretty underrated for some reason. I mean, like, I feel like not a ton of people are talking about him. I feel like when he was at Bama this year, he was just so overweight that his draft stock just kind of plummeted a little bit. Like, I feel like he could have been looking more top 10, like as one of the best offensive linemen in the draft. But he dropped like 20 pounds leading up to the NFL draft. And I think he is going to end up being a steal in this draft.
Yeah, the Raiders need, man, this top 15, they just all kind of need the same things, just something to give you just a leg up on everybody. Because I mean, you're looking up at the Chiefs and you're just like, what do we got to do to stop them? All right, we got to stock up the line, we got to get receivers, we got to get a quarterback. And I think the Raiders here, I mean, you're looking at what Gardner Minshew is your quarterback, so at least this year is going to be some sort of like kind of rebuild in a way, but I think you can do it in a way that's not just utter disaster if you do have a decent line play. All right. The Saints are next. And I feel like I keep getting these almost quarterback spots, but I'm not going to do it. I will not draft Bo Nix, I promise. Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State. Jared Verse came into this season with a ton of hype. And I don't know if he definitely was a presence. I wish he probably could have had a little bit of a better season this year, because I feel like last 22 season he was unstoppable. 9 sacks, 12 TFLs. He's going to be right now opposite Cam Jordan and be one of the best pass rush duos in the league. And then eventually will take over for Cam once he retires. I think in that NFC South, when you've got Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, and Bryce Young, I think you've got to get a defense that can stop them. I mean, obviously, Kirk and Baker are more seasoned, but if you can get up on the Panthers, I think you can start sneaking in some wins and maybe look at a division win somehow. I don't know if that's going to be realistic, but I think the Saints definitely have a shot if they build up their defense a little bit more.
I'll say this, draft season is inevitably a time of optimism. I mean, everybody's looking at their team and who they're going to pick and feeling better about next season, a little hopeful. Some teams are still going to suck really bad, and I think the Saints are one of them. I mean, I don't mind this pick for the Saints at all, but they are locked in with this Derek Carr contract and no cap space, and there is very, very little to be excited about if you're a Saints fan, except maybe this pick when they're on the clock at number 14, just to see something new come down the pipeline. But like, if I'm being realistic with myself, this team they're in for it for a couple of years. That Derek Carr situation is not a good one.
And it's so weird too. I mean, you go from Drew Brees to Winston to, this pick, and I mean, you ask yourself, if you're a Saints fan, how did we get here? Like, we were competing a few years ago, and it happens like in a blink of an eye, and you just got to push through those hard years to get to the good years, I guess.
The answer to that question is that our coaching staff hates us, and for whatever reason, they just don't want to help us. So
I forgot Josh is the resident Saints fan. I thought you were a Falcons fan.
Saints. I mean, I like the Saints. I wouldn't call myself a Saints fan. If I had to pick a team to cheer for, I'd probably cheer for the Dolphins. I like Mike McDaniel a whole lot. I know, but I just like Mike McDaniel. That dude's just so fun to watch. So
that's fair. Yeah, the Saints, they were the team I picked to win the division last year just because I thought the Derek Carr thing was going to work out. And then it just very quickly became evident that he is not that guy. And then the fact that they are keeping Dennis Allen, they feel like they are in the same, ironically enough, they feel like they're in the same situation the Raiders were this past year, when they fired Josh McDaniels. And it was like, why didn't you just fire him in the offseason? We all knew he wasn't that guy, except I guess Raiders front office convinced themselves he was for an extra 2 months or so. And now I think the Saints are doing the same with Dennis Allen.
Interesting question for you guys. There's some pretty big name coaches that didn't get jobs in the offseason. Belichick is one. And then the guy that was at the Titans,
Mike Vrabel.
I mean, teams like New Orleans, I mean, with those two guys still out there, I mean, I think this is the year where you see somebody like the Saints, if they get 6, 7, 8 games into this season, and like, okay, all right, Dennis Allen, you're done, and we want to go ahead and try and lock somebody up. I mean, do you guys think this is a year where we see firings before the Thanksgiving? It always seems like after Thanksgiving is when teams fire coaches during the season, but with Mike Vrabel and Bill Belichick actively wanting to coach, and each of them almost got a head coaching job. You see either one of them maybe, donning some, black and gold for next season?
It's an interesting question. I don't think it's out of the question because you're right. Normally when you've got these teams considering firing their mediocre to terrible head coaches, it's more of okay, we're just going to tread water the rest of the year. We'll name some interim guy and see where we go. But with those guys out there, I mean, you would of course have to gauge their interest. Maybe secretively behind the scenes beforehand if you're going to make that move. But Yeah, I could definitely see that because Mike Vrabel, I mean, if I'm a Saints fan, I'm way more excited about the prospects of Mike Vrabel coming in and rebuilding my team than watching whatever the fuck Dennis Allen's trying to do in New Orleans because it's not good.
It's just one of those things, it's been a while since there's been two high quality coaches that actively won a job and just didn't get a job in the offseason. And so it's just been something I've been thinking about. Want to see what you guys thought. So
No, that's fair. I think it's a good question. All right. So for the Indianapolis Colts, I am going to go with Terrion Arnold, cornerback, Alabama. This does conflict with my personal cornerback rankings that I submitted to for this show, but to me, it's a matter of regardless of what I think of Quinyon Mitchell. Look, the Bama guys always kind of just get a boost when it comes to these drafts. Like if you're really splitting hairs between two guys, pick the Bama guy. You're probably not going to regret it. So I'm going to go with Terrion Arnold as the first corner off the board here. It's Indy's biggest need. The AFC South, top to bottom. I mean, I don't think people would call it the most stacked division overall. I think you'd probably look at maybe the AFC North for that, but overall, they've got some receivers. Like the Titans got D-Hop and Ridley. The Texans now have Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. And then the Jags are the worst one, but they've still got Christian Kirk and then Evan Engram, who's essentially a wide receiver. I'm not going to mention Gabe Davis because he doesn't deserve to be in that conversation. But good wide receivers, they're going to need good corners to combat that. And I think Terrion Arnold could very well be the answer here for Indy at 15.
No, Gabe Davis ruined my fantasy season this year, along with many.
He didn't ruin mine, but he was definitely a wet blanket on my fantasy team for sure. He's just a bum. So,
kind of the same thing with Indianapolis. What do the Seahawks need the most? They need some help in the back. They need some help in the back end of their defense. And I mean, Kool-Aid and Terrion Arnold were just one of the best duos. It's the best duo since the duo that Cincinnati had a couple of years ago. I mean, they just shut down offenses. I mean, they were great together, but they're really good on their own. And so I have the Seahawks taking Kool-Aid here. What was one thing that we saw constantly on highlight reels this past season was people making long passes against the Seahawks. And so I think if you're going to be the Seahawks and you're going to attempt to, re-engineer, especially now, brand new head coach for the first time in what seems like ever in Seattle. You got a new guy leading the team. I think taking Kool-Aid here is a safe bet. It may not be the direction they go, but I think if you look at their roster, it's one of the safest and best options they can do is to take Kool-Aid here. And he just has a cool name. And he has that awesome chain with the Kool-Aid man on it. Like, that thing's awesome.
Yeah, Brandon was talking about splitting hairs with the DBs right here, especially getting the Bama bump is usually who you go with. It's kind of tough when you have two guys that are from Bama getting the Bama bump. I mean, like both of these guys, I mean, honestly, could be interchangeable. I think Terrion made himself some money this year, though. He had a huge 2023 season. I think 2022, he was a little suspect, I would say, especially in that Tennessee loss. But he really came back this year, and he really just showed out this year. He kind of embodied Link, like the little naysayers know. Him and Kool-Aid just locked up the SEC. So I think with the Colts and Seahawks pick right here, I could see these going either way. Okay, so with the Jaguars pick at number 17, I had them going with Byron Murphy. He's the defensive tackle from Texas. He's a really big dude, 6'1", 308 pounds. He's a very large individual. He had 6 sacks, 3 hits, 36 hurries this year. I think he was kind of overshadowed a little bit by T'Vondre Sweat. But I personally believe that Byron's a little bit better than Sweat. With the addition of Bo Davis as the D-line coach at Texas, I think he really helped him this year. I think Texas's D-line was insane this year. So I'd like him to come to the Jaguars and really bring a punch back. They hadn't really been great on defense since they had like Josh Allen and all that, like that combo. So I think I like Byron Murphy to the Jags at 17.
Good pick. Once again, Jacksonville is in one of those weird situations of where they have a good team. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is doing very well in Jacksonville, and they tried that weird experiment with Urban Meyer, and that went places. Just very thankful that they're back. I mean, I like the Jaguars. Even though Trevor Lawrence carved Alabama to pieces in that national championship game. I mean, I like Trevor Lawrence. He's really good at what he does. But if you're a Jaguars fan, your biggest thing is we do need help on the defense. And I think this is probably the best pick they could go with here at 17.
All right, the Bengals. The Bengals just lost their offensive coordinator to the Titans as their head coach. So now their one and only job is to keep Joe Burrow alive. They need Joe Burrow to succeed. He was sacked 24 times in only the 10 games he played. So with this pick, I know they had, I can't tell you who exactly they added, but I feel like they added a good bit of offensive linemen. They are taking Troy Fautanu from Washington. The dude was like a beast in the run game this year. Washington had one of the best run games, and I see Fautanu really being able to be put wherever they want him to be put, either whether that's tackle or guard, and that's really going to help. I mean, the Bengals lost Joe Mixon, so it's going to be tough this year run game wise, but I think they're suited. They're ready to come back with a vengeance this year, similar to 2 years ago when they made the Super Bowl. I think the Bengals will be, if they can keep T. Higgins, they will be one of the best offenses in football this year.
The Bengals are one of those sleeping giant teams that it's like you kind of forgot about them because of the Burrow injury, and they're also the absolute easiest pick when people ask, oh, who's going worst to first this year? Well, it's the team that shouldn't have finished last because their quarterback got hurt. They're all-world quarterback. So, yeah, I think that is a fair assessment. All right. At 19, the Los Angeles Rams are going to take Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback, Toledo. This is maybe the only pick that I've had a little bit of regret about because spoiler behind the curtain, we decided these picks beforehand. And, looking back on it, I'm like, well, Aaron Donald retiring, they probably need some help in the middle. And I didn't give them that help. But look, cornerback's still not a bad addition for them. The value is just too good for Quinyon Mitchell at this point, I think. And look, I also made this pick before the Rams brought in Tre'Davious White. So on paper, their corners look a little better than they did, when I assigned Mitchell to them. But at the end of the day, Tre'Davious White's played 10 games in the past 2 years. He's a guy that they can certainly hope for production and for him to stay on the field, but it's definitely not something they can guarantee. So I think getting a young corner here would not be a bad move. And then, maybe they can address the interior a little bit later on in the draft. But I mean, you can't replace Aaron Donald anyway. So you might as well give your defense a slightly newer identity, maybe juice up the secondary and then again, fill out the interior where you can.
All right. Let's go to Pittsburgh. So with them, bringing in Russell Wilson, what does Russell Wilson need to be successful where he's at now in his career? And I think that is a wide receiver that is sneaky good. On paper, he may not be your top wide receiver, but when it counts, he's there and he's going to catch the ball. As much as this pains me, that is Ladd McConkey. That dude is just like wild at how he is always open and he always catches the ball. And I think this just makes perfect sense for the Pittsburgh style of offense. Somebody that's going to be able to be open for those check down routes that Russell Wilson desperately looked for when he was in Denver. And you give a Pittsburgh team somebody like Ladd McConkey who can catch the ball and then is athletic enough to make some yards after the catch. And you're looking at a re-energized Pittsburgh offense, especially with Najee Harris in the backfield, just seems like getting better and better each year. You bring in Russell Wilson, who is good. He's not the Russell Wilson of old, but you throw Ladd McConkey out there and let him throw the ball to Ladd McConkey, and I think, that's what Pittsburgh needs, is somebody like Ladd McConkey to help out.
Yeah, I think you describe Ladd McConkey as a real gym rat. First one in, last one to leave. Works really hard, sneaky athletic for sure. I think all of that would apply to lunch pail guy for sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
Look, he fits all the stereotypes, and he's going to Pittsburgh. It just I feel like it makes sense. He's a hard
Yeah.
worker.
Like watching when Hunter Renfro was at Clemson for 22 and a half years, and he always seemed to be open with those illegal pick plays that won them national championships.
They always get described as Patriots guys as well. For some,
Yeah, but
I guess it's the Wes Welker thing.
the
We
yeah,
haven't had one of those guys in so long too. We've literally only had Welker and Edelman, and since then it's like, oh, that's where the white slot guy's gonna go. And I'm like, we don't have those anymore. I'd like to. They're fun. They're good, but like that's not just where they go.
Hey, you missed Danny Amendola.
Oh, you're right. I guess 3 is enough for a pattern. Yeah, that's fair.
3's a trend. No, but I do like that pick. I think Ladd McConkey's a great wide receiver. Kind of sticking with the Georgia theme though. Got a little flavor going to Miami. I've got the Dolphins at 21 picking Amarius Mims. Mims has kind of had an up and down college career. He's got all the talent in the world, but he's just been injured so much. So I think this pick right here is kind of an investment pick. I think they get somebody that's kind of theirs or a replacement for Terran Armstead, adding depth. So I don't know. I don't think he starts day one, but I think he's a guy that you keep on the bench maybe the first or second year, and he's an all pro starting his third year. He's got the size, so he's 6'7", 340 pounds. So I really like him if he can stay healthy.
yeah, I think as I watch more Dolphins football than I do anything, and that was one of the things this year that was kind of painful to watch was that the Dolphins do need a little bit more help on the O line. And I mean, you give the Dolphins a little more help on the O line. It gives Tua a little bit more time to let Tyreek Hill and Jaden Waddle do what they always do is get open and run for touchdowns. And I love it. I mean, it's great. It's fast paced. Mike McDaniel's over there acting like Lane Kiffin, throwing his clipboard in the air, jumping around, screaming. You just love to watch it. But yeah, I mean, you give the Dolphins a little bit more help on the O line, and I think and two, I mean, it bolsters their run game. I mean, their running backs this year were their running backs were what lifted my fantasy team this season. I mean, Raheem Mostert just came up out of nowhere, and I'm like, oh, boom, 30 points 3 weeks in a row, get some Trey. I mean, it was just beautiful. That's that. So yeah, as a Dolphins fan, seeing some O line help come in would make me ecstatic on draft night.
I was the idiot that traded Devon Achane after he did his crazy thing, thinking it was a 1 week wonder, and I had a trend of doing that this year, and somehow almost won still. But nonetheless, speaking of people who have almost won, the Philadelphia Eagles, the retirement of Jason Kelsey, man, I feel like the Eagles have been pretty steady, and that just feels like it's going to hurt them more than they know. The tush push may never see the light of day anymore. I'm lying.
Landon Dickerson's going to slide over and be the Landon Dickerson from Alabama. That's going to be
Well,
totally fine for them.
Josh, it's like you read my notes because we're going Olu Fashanu here from Penn State. And this is a twofold pick. One, you can do what you just said, move Dickerson in. But this is more for whenever Lane Johnson retires, you have a BAM. This is kind of like what Dickerson was for Kelsey. Fashanu is for Johnson being ready to replace on that line. They also lost a lot of depth on the line this year. And I think that if Philly's going to continue to play the brand of football, they need to invest in that line to continue. I mean, their run game's not going to stop this year. I mean, they got honestly better at the running back position going from Swift to Saquon Barkley. So I think Philly is going to just continue to play that smash mouth football, and Hurts is going to run it up your throat. And it's just going to be I think that if they do this, it's an investment in the future, like Trevor said with the Dolphins.
All right, I guess that leaves me here at 23 with the Minnesota Vikings. Again, I don't necessarily think the Vikings actually stick here at 23. I think it gets packaged for them to move up. But for now, we'll humor this pick, and I will give them Laiatu Latu. I don't know. I think one of those is right. Linebacker, UCLA, essentially an edge. this will give them a little bit extra pass rush on that defense. They basically made a swap of Danielle Hunter for Jonathan Grenard with the Texans. As far as pass rushers are concerned, they got the younger one in the deal, which will be, potentially nice for whatever competitive timeline they want to get on. But Laiatu Latu is going to give them, just someone else they can get to the quarterback. Because realistically, you need, I would say, at least two of those guys if you want to have a defense that anybody's going to take seriously. And you look at their defense, and yes, Andrew Van Ginkel is going to get you a couple. Yes, Jonathan Bullard could get you a couple, but this is a guy who could really turn into one of the more elite, quarterback chaser downers here in the NFL. And I think it would be a nice little compliment to the first pick they made here in the first round of JJ McCarthy. Go a little offense defense here.
All right. Traded this on purpose because he knows I don't like the Cowboys. He makes me pick for the Cowboys. So like my cynical side wants to like make the Cowboys pick someone terrible. Like I said, I don't think this is going to happen because if you've watched the Cowboys draft for any of recent history, it's blatantly obvious that most of the time Jerry Jones just kind of picks who he thinks might. It's like he almost pulls up like the CBS draft indicator, and it's like, who does CBS think that I'm going to draft? And then he goes that direction. But I mean, if you look at the Cowboys roster, there is one glaring hole that they have, and that is at running back. They have Deco Dowell right now listed as their starting running back. And an aging Dak Prescott who, is not what he used to be. That ankle injury that he got a couple of years ago was really bad. I mean, you can tell he's not as mobile as he used to be. And getting them a running back that is not only talented, but is a workhorse style running back. And I think that's what you get if they take Jonathan Brooks from Texas. Watching Jonathan Brooks play this year, he is he waited his turn. He waited behind really good running backs there at Texas. And then when he got his turn this year, he had 187 carries, almost 1,200 yards. He was averaging 6.1 yards per carry. He had 10 touchdowns. Just what you want in a running back. He has the versatility to catch it out of the backfield, which everybody loves because you always want to check down route. But I mean, if you're the Cowboys front office and you're like, okay, we were really good last year, and then we got to the playoffs and we fell apart, like just spectacularly fell apart. What is one way you slow football games down so that you don't get outscored so fast? You run the ball. It's difficult to run the ball when you don't have a running back who can run the ball. And so I think, you take Brooks here and it gives you the ability to lean into this, just this different style of offense to where you're not putting everything on Prescott to make every play of every drive.
Yeah, I definitely like the pick right there. I think Brooks had a big season this year. But going on to pick 25, Packers are on the clock. I've got them picking Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson. I didn't really know who to go with right here, so I kind of went best available. I think Nate Wiggins is going to fit very well on that defense. Kind of pair him with Jair Alexander. Is Alexander still on the Packers? Or did he get traded?
Still on the Packers. Yeah, you had me questioning myself for a second because I remember those rumors. But yeah, still on the Packers.
Okay, that's what I thought. I couldn't remember. But yeah, I think him paired with Alexander would make them a really good tag team duo for Green Bay. Missing Jeffrey for this pick because I usually get his stamp of approval for the Green Bay pick. Usually I feel like we're always begging Green Bay to pick a receiver right here, but I feel like they're kind of set right now on the offensive side. So I think DB is kind of a big need right now. He's tall, wiry. I think he's really athletic. He had a really good season for Clemson this year. So I like Nate Wiggins right there at 25.
It's a good pick. Tampa Bay Bucks up at 26. I have them going Jackson Powers Johnson, a center out of Oregon. Baker Mayfield was sacked 40 times this year. And then Ryan Jensen retired. So couple that in the fact of you need the center of your offensive line to be one of the better offensive lineman on your roster. And I think Jackson Powers Johnson can be that on the team. He was the Remington Trophy winner this past year. He didn't allow a sack at Oregon. And he has experience at all three interior line positions. So if you don't think he's the center of the future, he can go play guard. So I think getting that team another threat on the offensive line, giving Baker more time, they were incredibly I was so surprised how good they were this year. And they're going to compete. They're going to be the closest thing to compete with Atlanta this year. So offensively, you're going to have to bolster up that offensive line to do that.
Yeah, I think otherwise it's probably Atlanta's division to lose. Granted, their team is more speculative at this point, but they certainly seem to be the stronger team on paper. But hey, the Bucs just keep winning this division, whether it's with Brady or without. So who knows? They very well could run it back for a third year in a row at least. All right, 27th pick, Arizona Cardinals. This team has a decent amount of needs, especially on the defensive side, but I am going to go with Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. The Cardinals corners are just not very good. Current starting projected cornerbacks are Garrett Williams and Sean Murphy Bunting, who were 91st and 99th respectively graded in coverage last year per PFF, which puts them both as barely startable corners on any NFL team. So look, Sean Murphy Bunting, I think, has a little more to offer with sort of a different skill set that doesn't just revolve around coverage, but still you need some guys that can cover the receivers. And I think Cooper DeJean, the Cardinals will be hoping, if they make this pick, can be that guy. But again, they are, assuming they make the Marvin Harrison pick, which we have both in this mock draft and through conventional wisdom, a lot of people think that will happen. I think going with Marvin on offense and then getting a guy like Cooper DeJean on the defense is a nice little start and a good way to maybe, I don't know, who knows, backdoor their way into a wild card spot if everything kind of breaks right. Because, I mean, we know the Niners have a stranglehold on that division, but the Cardinals could still make some decent noise for themselves outside of that.
I've seen a lot of people say Cooper DeJean maybe is a safety. What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, honestly, I'm not a tape grinder like that. I don't know what exactly his skill set fits the best, whether he belongs as a corner or a safety. All I'll say is I hope that conjecture doesn't come from the fact that he's just a white dude and they don't want to give a white guy an actual shot at corner. Obviously, we've got Riley Moss in Denver. He's playing corner, but he's not a guy who was ever the prospect that Cooper DeJean was. I don't know. I hope whatever team Cooper DeJean goes to is able to leverage whatever skills he has in the best way possible, and that they don't, whoever it is, doesn't just pigeonhole him into, we don't want you to play corner because we just don't want you to play corner. Like let him play it if you think, based on the tape, that he's got the skill set to do it.
All right, 28. I got real lucky here. I kind of figured, with the Bills are at 28. I kind of figured that something interesting was going to happen with the whole Stephon Diggs thing. And so I had already figured that the Bills were going to need a wide receiver, whether or not they kept Stephon Diggs or not, just to give Josh Allen some help and to give Stephon Diggs some relief. But with the fact that he's leaving or that he's gone, it bolsters the idea that the Bills really have to go wide receiver here. So I have them taking Keon Coleman from Florida State. Coleman was a really good receiver this year at Florida State. Florida State, whether or not you think they got robbed of a playoff spot or not, that's a whole different conversation. But Keon Coleman was a really good receiver this year. I mean, he had 50 catches, 658 yards, and 11 touchdowns, averaging a little over 13 yards a catch. I mean, you give Josh Allen somebody who is not afraid to go up and catch the ball and run with it. And, I mean, you're looking at a Bills team that's not relying on Josh Allen to run for 70-yard touchdowns to try to win a playoff game in blizzard conditions in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think with Stephon Diggs leaving, that was kind of a shock, at least for us. I mean, maybe inside the organization, they knew more that was going to happen, obviously. But I think Keon Coleman's a very underrated pick in this draft. He's a very good wide receiver. So I like that pick right there. So going to pick 29, we got Detroit on the clock. So kind of going kind of with the same idea I had with the Packers. I kind of went duos. So with Detroit's pick, I've got them picking Chop Robinson out of Penn State. So he'll stay up north. Name alone, Chop Robinson is like top tier in this draft. Chop Robinson's such a cool name. But I think you pair him with Aiden Hutchinson on that line. I think that Detroit defensive line is insanely good. Um, I kind of view him as like a poor man's Micah Parsons. I don't think he's got maybe as much potential as Micah Parsons has, but I think Charles Robinson for sure he's very explosive off the line, a little bit like Dallas Turner. So I like kind of the duo kind of thing right there with him and Aiden Hutchinson. So I really like him in Detroit.
All right, Baltimore. We're in the end game now. Baltimore here. This is a pick. This guy right here, I think, similar to a few years ago, when you're the fastest man at the combine, somebody's going to take you in the first round. Unfortunately, John Ross did not pan out, but we saw that. I mean, he went top 10, and he was definitely not top 10 talent, as we could see. But I have the Baltimore Ravens going Xavier Worthy out of Texas. That 4.21 was insane, and he's a guy that I can really see making this Baltimore offense just incredibly better. I mean, they're already good, and it's just going to be blinking you miss them. He's quick, obviously enough. I think he could play slot or outside. Him and Zay Flowers could just, I think, really help Lamar Jackson get over the hurdle and get to the Super Bowl. I think that offense of Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and Xavier Worthy is good enough to push, I mean, some of the top teams in the AFC. So I think Xavier Worthy is worthy of a first round pick. You see what I did there?
I wish we had a clapping sound effect or maybe a sad trumpet or something. I don't know. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's something that the Ravens with Lamar Jackson haven't really had. I mean, they've tried to kind of add that speed threat and they've had maybe lesser versions of it with, washed up Deshaun Jackson or Demarcus Robinson or whatever they want to try to do at receiver. I think if you were able to get an actual speed threat guy who works out as an NFL receiver and isn't just a John Ross type that can just run, straight line speed and can't really do anything else. Yeah, that would definitely add another extra dynamic to the Ravens for sure. I'm going to stick at receiver with a team that made it just a little bit further than the Ravens did, the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to have them taking Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. And all I'll say is if this happens, the league needs to be investigated. There's been a lot of talk about Brandon Ayuk getting traded because the Niners just obviously can't pay everyone. And eventually, assuming they stick with Brock Purdy, they're going to have to pay Purdy. And that quarterback contract is going to take up a lot of money that they already don't really have. So they're going to have to get rid of one of these skill guys. Ayuk has been the most heavily rumored one. And if they replace 6 foot, 200-pound Brandon Ayuk with 6'4", 205-pound, just as fast Brian Thomas Jr. alongside Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey. I want someone arrested because you shouldn't just be able to do that at pick 31. That seems unfair. This class is so stacked with wide receivers. The fact that the Niners could potentially get a guy like this late, and I transparently don't think Brian Thomas will be available here, but if he was, just not fair. You shouldn't be allowed to have this.
All right. Super Bowl champs. Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, started off just a weird year, with everything that went on in and outside of, the Chiefs organization with all the emphasis that was put around Travis Kelce and his personal life. It's just, they started out just not good.
Wait,
then,
something happened with Travis Kelce in his personal life this year?
Yeah, I really don't keep up with much of what goes on. I heard that he's like, maybe finally in a relationship or something. Not really sure. But
with Miley Cyrus, I think.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah, it's Miley Cyrus. But I mean, with the way that things are going right now with the Chiefs, it could be a cruel summer for them. I mean, they may have to shake off a few things. They may have a blank space in their they may have a blank space on their wide receiver list And so I think for that, you go Troy Franklin from Oregon. Um, you know, as if Rice can't come together, they're a little bit of bad blood that might go on there. You just
All
really
right,
got to
we
do all
get
you.
it. He dated Taylor Swift.
You just got to do what you got to. I mean, for the Chiefs, it. But in all seriousness, if with all this that's going on with Rice, if this is one of those things that takes him out, they're gonna have to replace him. They're already in need of wide receiver help. And so, Troy Franklin had an amazing year at Oregon. You just look at his stats from the years past. 21, he had 18 catches for 209 yards. In 22, he had 61 catches for 891 yards. And then this past year, he had 81 catches and almost 1,400 yards. He's a lot. A lot of people watched Oregon football this year just because Oregon was up there. They played Washington twice. Troy Franklin was a huge part of the Oregon offense. And for the Chiefs, if they want to keep this, what seems to almost be decade of dominance rolling, you got to keep giving. The only Mahomes' only weapon can't be Travis Kelce forever. At some point, the Travis Kelce magic will run out. At some point, he's going to get triple teamed, quadruple teamed to where just everybody's on him and you're going to have to go somewhere else. And you saw that in the early part of the year. And, Travis Kelce also is known for going through really big hills and valleys in his season of he'll have series of games where he's on fire. Anything you throw his way, he catches. And other times he just doesn't. And so, maybe bringing in Franklin, there could be a love story between him and Patrick Mahomes for another Super Bowl title.
I know Brandon is incredibly excited about all these Taylor Swift references. I wish you guys could see his face right now. He is just absolutely so happy.
And
I've just been through this. I've made these puns before. I've heard them all. I'm done. We are retiring the Swift puns. Yeah. They're over.
And I will tell you this too. I know nothing about Taylor Swift. I literally have just a list of Taylor Swift songs pulled up on my computer and was just kind of plugging song titles in where it made sense. And so,
I knew you were going so fast. I was like, dang, Josh must be a huge Taylor Swift fan.
Now it is just a list of them right here. But you talk about the Chiefs and you can't not make Taylor Swift jokes because, I don't remember. I hated watching Chiefs games because it was more how many times are they going to put Taylor Swift on the TV and not football. And I'm here to watch football, not Taylor Swift. I want to go watch Taylor Swift. I would sell a kidney and sit in the nosebleeds for one of her concerts.
Well, that is our mock draft this year. Before we go, we're going to give some quick, bold takes, and I will start us here. I think that 6 quarterbacks are going to be taken this first round. I think your top 3 guys, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, are going to go early. Then J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix. I think Bo Nix. Someone's going to come in the latter half and come get them. Yes, Josh.
Where do you think Nix goes?
I think it's going to be a team that trades back in. Whether that's like, I don't know. I'm looking through the list of teams. Someone like the Rams or maybe a team that has somebody there this year that he could sit behind and learn and really just like take in. I don't think he's a day one starter this next year. I think he can make a living out of being a perennial backup and make plenty good money and be pretty good at it. Trevor, what's your bold prediction for this draft?
All right, this one's pretty bold because it's 17 years in the making. So for the past 17 years, the SEC has dominated the NFL draft with having the most players drafted. So I think this year the streak finally ends, and I think the Big Ten overtakes the SEC for the most players drafted. So I think with Michigan, all their players coming in, I think we get kind of like a Georgia draft from 2 years ago where you just had like everybody on the roster get drafted. I think they're I think Michigan's players really going to put them over the top right there. So I think the 17-year drought of something like anybody other than the SEC is going to end. I think the Big Ten is going to overtake the SEC though.
I'm not. I mean, this is kind of just. I don't know if it's a bold take. It's kind of what I'm thinking. I think the Super Bowl is two teams that nobody would really expect to make the Super Bowl. I don't think the Chiefs are going to run it back for 3 years in a row. Um, I do think you see a situation where the Super Bowl ends up being like the Packers make the Super Bowl this year. I mean, they were really close last year. You get a Packers team, much as I hate to say it, I mean, that's just, I don't, I mean, Dallas has a chance if they play their cards right. Philly could make the Super Bowl just depending on how a lot of the things with Philly is just what their morale is starting off the season. But I think this is the year we get a interesting Super Bowl matchup that is not able to be pre-scripted by a lot of people.
What's the color matchup say? Let's see what the
I have
color.
no idea what the color matchup is.
What is the what Super Bowl are we on? Super Bowl this
I
year
can't
was.
imagine the logo's out yet. I feel like they don't reveal that for a little bit. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Let's see. It's playing in Caesar Superdome. Oh, they did. It's like red and green.
So maybe they're trying to go for a rematch of the.
That's Texans Packers, if you ask me.
I
Fits what
mean,
you're saying, Josh, and it fits the
yeah,
colors.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm down. I would be down with a Texans Packers. That would it'd be awesome to see
That
that.
sounds
So
that sounds amazing, honestly.
doesn't it though? Yeah.
All right, Brandon, hit us with your bold take.
Yeah, this one is a little contradictory to what I said about I think my Joe Alt pick to the Titans will be the accurate one. This one is I'm lukewarm on if I think it, but I could see it. It wouldn't totally shock me. I'm gonna say the Chargers don't draft a receiver with their first pick. Jim Harbaugh is a weirdo. The way he's already constructed this team has been to not accentuate the strengths of Justin Herbert at all. He is very much focused on the run game. He keeps talking about the run game. He's got Greg Roman in there to operate the run game. And it wouldn't shock me to see him go with Joe Alt. And then obviously you have to face the reporter questions after that. But like, you pass it off pretty easily. Like, this is the best player we thought was available at the time. We wanted help on the O line. And then I don't think they're going to not draft a receiver at some point because currently they're slated to start like Darius Davis as their wide receiver too, with I think Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston, and Johnston's pretty awful. But like, it wouldn't totally shock me to see either the Chargers, take Joe Alt and then take a second round receiver, or take him and then trade back into the back end of the first, where even in our mock, we have a bunch of these great receivers still available. So I'm just going to say Harbaugh does weird Harbaugh things, and they don't take a receiver at, what is it, number five? Number five.
They're gonna go Blake Corum. They're gonna go Mitch.
What they're really gonna do is trade Justin Herbert to the Patriots and then take JJ McCarthy at number 3. That's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There you go.
That makes total Harbaugh sense.
There you go.
Well, all right, guys. If you've made it to the end, we appreciate you. 5th year in a row we've done this. It's pretty impressive. And I actually want to take a second, thank Brandon for his time. Brandon, you have been so giving of your time, and we are very appreciative of you coming on here. How can people find you on all the platforms?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys. This was a good time. I am at Benchwarmer Brand on every social media platform you can think of, other than Tumblr. You've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, wherever you want to find me and consume video content. I am there as Benchwarmer Brand, and then we do have the Off the Bench podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. It's Off the Bench with Benchwarmer Brand. If you search that, it should come up if you want to hear more of my ramblings about football and our eventual mock draft that we'll probably do next week, because we are running out of time to do that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, any last thoughts from the crew before we sign off for another year?
Patriots to the Super Bowl.
Would be fine with me because that fits with my hot take that Super Bowl is what the heck this year. So
Red team.
Look, I love it. I love it. I want a Super Bowl matchup like that. I'm telling you, I like the Texans Packers. I think that sounds very fun.
Yeah, Especially with them, they're wearing. You say they're in New Orleans, Trey?
Yeah, New Orleans.
Yeah, that would be awesome. You get the Texans and the Packers playing in New Orleans in the Super Bowl. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Well, all right, guys. Thank you for listening and see you next year.